Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I'm Justin Korver.
I'm Brittany Ham.
We have been working together for a couple of years now, since 2018, on a collaborative body of work. It's been a really interesting kind of site of like research, exploration, and play that provides another space for us to work other than our individual solo practices. We both started this body of work because we got this really amazing opportunity to go to Germany as part of the Berlin residency that's run by the Contemporary in San Antonio. And while we were there, we both got to see these like incredible, weird, like very oddly proportioned animals in European tapestries, and we both loved like the charming strangeness of those images, and we wanted to make our own.
And we've both been interested in tapestries for a while. We went to grad school together. That is how we met and became friends. And some of our like early I like this art, what do you like conversations were about things like the unicorn tapestries up at the cloisters in New York City. So the tapestry exploration gave us an opportunity to sort of like dig into our shared interests that we had been chatting about for a really, really long time.
Yeah, and one of the allegories that you see all the time in those tapestries is the allegory of the hunt. And the hunt is usually used to talk about like romantic pursuit, and it's framed in I think really problematic ways, where it's this masculine aggressor pursuing a kind of passive feminine prey. We didn't love that, so we decided to kind of like invert that at times and play with like the multiplicity of relationship dynamics that we've experienced in our own lives and that we think other people that are contemporary with us would experience.
And like what is pursuit and what is play, and how can those things sort of like overlap and shift in definition. Yeah,
so and in this show we had been using this idea of the bonfire as this like moment of revelry and play. And so this show is after the bonfire. It's in the kind of darker passage of this like imagined narrative that we're engaged with. And in some of the works, you'll see the movement from like day to night, or a particularly like kind of nocturnal palette being used. And so we're thinking about like the present moment as this kind of like after moment, and maybe looking at
the future.
Yeah, what's going on.
And this series has been so fun for us because this is now the third iteration of playing with this like hunt-themed tapestry-based exploration. It's like the third line in shows, and each iteration of the exhibition has given us an opportunity to explore different aspects of hunting tapestries and sort of like this pursuit and play. So it's been really satisfying to like work through all of it now to like the ending space.
And there are echoes in this show of those earlier shows. Like that dog sculpture is from the very first exhibition that kind of engaged with the tapestries. This group of 4 is from the second. And then all of these works are for this exhibition.
And like the larger tapestry, I think is like a really nice example of how our working process has sort of developed over time. Like our first exhibition that we did together in 2018 was basically like a game where I would make 5 paintings and he made 5 small sculptures, and we traded, and he'd chop up my paintings and I had to turn his sculptures into paintings. And it became a very like turn-based game. So in the shows that we did after 2018, we did a lot of this like you make, I make, we make together play in the work. And this tapestry is similarly to some previous works that we've made, like is made of all the cannibalized parts of the smaller tapestries that we made for the previous exhibition. So there are literal physical elements of previous work and sort of previous ideas and previous play currently at play in this exhibition.
Like that path is there, and it's also on the sculptures, right? So literally the same image is being like chopped up and reused in different ways in different places.
And all the figures, the mirror cut figures on the tapestry as well, they are made by combining like the embroidered silhouettes that we utilized in the original 10 grid. So they became a nice opportunity for us to play with like what happens after the bonfire, and like the creatures have become hybrid creatures and sort of like working toward new futures.
Yeah. So we're also open to any questions about process, about the themes of the work, or about like professional practice things, especially this being a school. Sometimes that is useful. Let us know if you have any questions. Yeah.
How did y'all make these? Are they mirrors?
Yeah. So it's acrylic mirror, and we created vector drawings of all the figures, and then you can use that vector to cut the mirror itself using the laser. And there's also the bonfire in the middle of it. If you take the acrylic and you flip it, you can etch the back of the mirror, which destroys the mirror part of it. So that's how you get that frosted texture, and then you can still cut the outline. You just have to, bad pun, you have to mirror your thing before you cut the mirror.
I was watching a video of y'all sew it on too, so y'all, whenever you cut it, did you include the whole?
Yes, so they were always planned as like buttons almost, that they would be, or charms, that they would be stitched onto the tapestry in the end.
It's very lovely.
Oh, thank you. We like it too. Yeah.
This is awesome, and you are so daring to put the poetry in the mirrors and the fabric. Like, I just started crying reading your
Oh,
pieces.
thanks.
So gorgeous. I'm also curious how, if you could talk about the fabric and the dyeing and the sewing. And
Sure.
So this tapestry is all woven. We use a kind of weaving called jacquard weaving. It's actually like, when I explain it to people, you usually say it's a computer-controlled loom, but actually computers come from these looms, not the other way around. So like the jacquard looms are the antecedent of all of our computers, but it lets you basically, you construct the image as a palette, and then like the color that we use for like the sky is a particular weave pattern. The color that's this cutout section is another particular weave pattern. All the colors you see are the result of a relatively limited number of threads, and based on the pattern and then also what thread you're pushing to the surface, that's what's gonna change the color. So like the back of it, you can see the mirror of all the colors that are there. So we're choosing to push forward a lot of the darker threads, but the same color threads are in this as are in those. It's just a question of what you're pushing forward. Do you want to talk about the dyeing?
Yeah, sure. So in the first like round with this sculpture, the other side of it is like a really crudely like dip dye painted landscape that was like painted together on like paint rags. And we wanted to play with that like coloring and painting integration in this one. So these long, the diptych landscape that is on the back wall was printed as black and white, or as close as we could get to black and white in this very limited palette. And then I hand stained those with jacquard liquid acrylic dye ink, which was really lovely because the color is like very, very rich and it bonds to the fabric a little bit more actively. And we've sort of been interested in how like we thought that like this one was like pretty colorful at the start, but now we're like, actually it's like pretty pale compared to the actual dye. So we've been sort of excited to play with like bringing together these like drawing practice, painting practice, fiber practice, because I'm a painter and he's a sculptor, but we both did a lot of fibers work sort of in previous, I would say, like moments of practice. So the collaborative practice has been like really fun for us because we get to sort of like live in that space a little bit.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
For some of us that aren't aware of like the bonfire concept or like after the bonfire, would you mind like giving like a short little?
Sure. Yeah.
So we kind of thought there's this historical moment called the Bonfire of the Vanities that happens during the Renaissance period, and there's this like monk who convinces everybody in Florence to like burn their worldly possessions. And it's in that moment it's this kind of like ecstatic religious expression, but there's also this idea of like the bonfire as a space for inversion. I'm gonna get so annoyingly academic right now, but Bakhtin has this idea about the carnivalesque, which in the carnivalesque, it's where the norms of society get inverted, right? He talks about it as a kind of pressure valve release, right? That like in a repressive society, you need the opposite to let things go, right? So the bonfire is this chance for the inversion. Right, it's this moment we think about like the woods and the night and the bonfire as a chance for things to be other than they are. So we were really interested in that as like this idea of the moment of breaking this kind of structure that we had been playing with the relationship between the masculine, feminine figures, the dogs and the deer.
Hunt and the prey.
Yeah, so that's like coming from those tapestry things, but it's, for us, the bonfire was like the party, right? And this is like after the party. Yeah.
And we're also thinking a lot about like Greco-Roman myth. We're thinking about like Diana and Actaeon, and you know, like you see Diana bathing and she turns you into stag, and then you're like devoured by hounds. But like, what if the hounds and you get along versus being devoured? And
so it's like, it doesn't accept the Greco-Roman thing is like the essential thing of you is like a fatal flaw, right? So like Actaeon, the iconic hunter, gets eaten by his hunting dogs, right? We're like, no, thank you, right? So we're kind of flipping that over, and like the dogs and the people can live together, right? And the dogs and the deer and they become like the same things. Right, so for us, like the hybridity of this was like another thing, right? It was a third path option, right? Where instead of choosing the kind of two paths available, you can say like, no, I'd like another option, please.
You don't have to be the man or the dog. It can be man-dog.
That's so interesting, but the thing that I was gonna ask you about is the thing I see in these images where they're experiencing the bonfire, there's just so much freedom. And then with this, you see like a little more chaos, which is also freedom. But I was wondering if you had a relationship to that idea about freedom or chaos, and how you know, before the bonfire or during versus after.
I think there's
thinking about those things.
We talked about it as like there was the possibility that the fire begins to spread, right? And what can that mean? So there's a lot of like the same Western art historical tradition that gives you things like the tapestries also gives you things like the history of the Enlightenment, which uses like the metaphor of light and fire to talk about intellect. So we're kind of like beginning to let the bonfire transition into like wildfire, right? So like the peach is called catching, right? Like the fire is beginning to move. So, but it also connects to things like the myth of Prometheus, right? That fire is knowledge, and like maybe those things can start to move around. Yeah, so like our hybrid characters, maybe they're attending to these fires, but maybe they're spreading the fires, and there's ambiguity there about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Is there a reason you're using mirrors? Because this is just me projecting onto it. And I drew a mirror plane somewhere. When I'm looking at this, it's confrontational to look in a mirror, and my form takes on this animal, this fire. Is there a specific reason you chose it to be immersive or something like that?
I would say it's about that a mirror is understood in motion, so all of these images are kind of moving and flickering even though they're relatively stable. I also think it is about like punching out little pieces of the world and grabbing them into the composition. So like you can't display this without it capturing little bits of you, and you can't display it without it capturing little bits of its context. So that was something we were thinking about with the work.
Yeah, I think we were attracted to the sort of like seeing yourself like in the landscape, or seeing yourself in this like fire of thought and awareness.
Yeah, and we had played with the silhouette in earlier work, and this was a way of having the silhouette be full of something, right? And
Yeah.
it's full of a kind of potential as well, right? Like anything can be in it. Like as Brittany was sewing it the other day, she kept on seeing her own reflection and thinking somebody was behind her.
It kept on
right?
jump scaring me.
I think there's something about like the way that a mirror also destabilizes our sense of what we see.
Yeah, it's like interesting, especially like in some of the denser areas, you have to like get quite close to it as you're sewing it. And I wear clear reflective glasses, and the mirrors kept on shining and catching light through my glasses. So it was like sort of like being like in a light chamber for a little bit. I would say it's similar to the aura that you see when you're having a migraine, which was kind of interesting for it to not happen during a migraine. But it was like an interesting, like, I don't know, visual experience to be like that close to like all the flashing lights and also like the flatness of the image.
I'm so sorry, I'm gonna ask you to talk about something.
Yeah.
When you brought the poetry, you had an original intention of how it was gonna be displayed. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that experience?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Originally, the poetry was going to be sewn on, like it was over here, because we had envisioned everything as sort of acting as charms of adornment on the landscape.
We were talking about this on the ride over here, actually, and we did not plan for them to be pinned on the wall, but as we were making the exhibition, the idea of pinning the words through the tapestry and onto the wall occurred to us. And when I talk to my students, I talk a lot about like the gift of an accident. Like that, if everything goes exactly how you plan for it to go, then you get what you plan to get. And one of the amazing things in art is that sometimes you get more than you plan to get, right? So like, I love this so much more because of those pins and because they can jump off the surface and because of those shadows that happen because of it.
Also like the way the letters, like they dance a little bit and they move and they're like, I think the large tapestry gets movement from like the size of the fabric billowing against the wall, but that wasn't gonna happen on the smaller tapestries. So like the pins have given us this like really lovely gift of movement.
Yeah.
I think that is like pretty lovely and sparkly and twinkly when you walk by it. I think it like activates that space just a little bit.
Oscar Wilde said, if you knew what you wanted to be, your punishment is that you had to be it. So like if you know he said like if you know you want to be a baker, then you have to be a baker, right? So I think like one of the things that I love about working in the way that we do is that like, I don't know. And that's like a wonderful gift you can give yourself, is that you're in the process of knowing and you're in the process of discovery instead of having that thing be a stable, static thing. So like, just like stay open throughout the process, and then I really think you'll get things that you wouldn't if you were like too bullheaded or something. Yeah.
And this is like this collaborative process is so nourishing for our individual practices as well, because we're experimenting with mediums or experimenting with different ways of like approaching an image or an object in ways that like I wouldn't in my solo practice, right? Like I'm a painter. I'm not touching sculptures in my individual practice, but this collaborative space gives me an opportunity to sort of like be there with it.
Both of the solo practices feed the collaboration, but the collaboration also feeds both of the solo practices. So there's a really like genuinely mutually supportive aspect of it, right? Like, so I really like encourage folks to
make friends, work with your friends.
Stay in touch.
Well, it's for us as well. Like we lived in the same city and taught at the same school in San Antonio for so long. Justin has recently started teaching and working and living up in Kansas City. So now this round of the exhibition we had to complete like via distance completely, whereas before we were always within like a 20-minute drive of each other. So that has been like an interesting thing to contend with while like working together in partnership. It's like we're finding new ways to use like digital mediums and like utilizing things that he has access to at his new institution in terms of machinery support that we didn't have before. So distance doesn't have to mean the end. It can also mean new beginnings.
Yeah.
Oh, I did have a question. Way back when I wanted to ask about this piece that's right here.
Sure.
Because, I mean, unless I missed something, it's the only time that we see true white and also the straight lines, right? So I'm curious, like, at which point in developing this body that came into play, or this piece.
So this is the very first collaborative sculpture that we made together back in 2020.
Yeah, and we still like her.
Yeah, we still like her. She gets to hang out still. But so, like, this is my, I think, favorite piece from that first exhibition that we did, because it feels like it was like the first real seamless, like, we figured out like the pattern of working where like somebody isn't making too many decisions, we're both working equally together. So it sort of was the first experimentation with like the organic versus the rigid, you know, like the sharp and the hard and the slick and the smooth next to the, like the drippy, ooey gooey wet. And especially if we're thinking like the first exhibition very much was about like exploring the rigidity of those, like the roles of the hunter and the hunted. This one was meant to be sort of like on one side it's like a little loosey-goosey, and on the other side it is very regimented to sort of talk about those roles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's also like, it's doing a thing, part of the reason I think we still like it is because it's doing a thing about contrast, where like the way that that painting is made is so in contrast to that really grid. I love that kind of really anal retentive, fastidious detail. So like building that cradle and then using a scroll saw to like cut through it to make that silhouette was a very like me kind of way of making things. And I think the thing that makes this thing work is that it puts that into like meaningful contrast with Brittany's sense of like painterly surface, right? I think some of these later works are still like parsing in that kind of contrast. Like the sharpness and crispness of that laser cut element on this very like amorphous, soft textile surface, that still does a very similar thing to this. But you also see us like literally just like learning, like we didn't know how to make jacquard tapestries when we made that, right? So like we learned how, and then we started to like get more ambitious with them, and now we're like going in and reworking. So like oddly things like the stain painting is getting picked back up, right? But they're spiraling into something else. Yeah.
So that's actually kind of leading into a question that I have, which is I'm so interested in your concepts and your process. So when I heard you first talking about like we're looking at these older tapestries, but and so if this is too personal, you know, it's that I don't want to ask you just something that's too personal to you, but then where you're going with that is like becoming something else, right? Like you're looking at something that's been existent for a long period of time, and you're like, let's see what this third way in this, I don't know, in the bonfire. I mean, so right now we're kind of lucky to hear your talk at this moment because I'm thinking of Halloween and how it's one of those moments in the United States where people want to be and get to be things that they're not usually revelry costumes and makeup and whatever, and how that is really, you know, one of the ways that people do things that are not what they usually do. Anyway, I guess I'm just interested in how did y'all come up with this, because that's such a cool concept, becoming something else and looking for something, a third way, you know, not just one or the other.
Yeah.
I think it's just like,
It's in a lot of our own work.
I think it's existing in the world as like a weird person. Like gives you access to that. So I don't know, like art kids always love Halloween, right? Because it's a chance where you get to make a thing and be a new person with the thing that you made, right? And I think that like, I don't know, I feel like most art is about like making this thing that tries to like stand between you and the world and like, because if you could say it, you would say it, but like the thing says it, you know? So I think they let us do those things that we can't otherwise.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.